back to my channel. We're in the truck on the way out to central Nevada this time. We're gonna go hit some ghost towns. We're gonna do some rock hounding. We are gonna dip our paws in some hot springs. We're gonna stare at some sunsets. We're gonna turn our cell phones off. We're gonna check the hell out. Man, you guys, look how beautiful this is. We made it to our campsite for the night. We are in Big Smoky Valley, which is pretty much in central Nevada, south of Austin, north of Tonopah. It's one of my favorite places in Nevada and the whole freaking country. Look at that view. And this time we're going to talk about ghost towns. So I don't know how many Nevada explorers we've got watching this, Nevada historians, but in case you didn't know, Nevada has more ghost towns than any other state in America, with something around like 600, 650, far more than any populated towns in Nevada. And there's so many because I always find this so interesting because while the California gold fields called the American Dreamers to the far west, you know, the west coast, the Comstock Lode, which was discovered in Virginia City in 1859, called a lot of people back into Nevada. From 1859, the race to stake as many claims as people could all across Nevada was on, with thousands and thousands of silver, gold, copper, all kinds of mineral discoveries were made in Nevada. And many of them are nestled into Nevada's hundreds of mountain ranges. So if you're not from the West and maybe don't know what a ghost town is, here you go. So Nevada experienced the majority of its famous silver and gold discoveries from the late 1850s through the early 20th century, which each basically sort of boasted its own claim to fame. So you've got Virginia City, which was what popped everything off, essentially, discovered in 1859. It was the world's largest silver discovery, and it still is, which is crazy. The largest silver discovery on planet Earth was made in Virginia City, which is like right near the Reno Tahoe area. And then you've got, you know, other claims to fame, like the purest silver discovery, which was in Hamilton, and Treasure City, which is kind of like right outside of Ely. Then you've got the Queen of the Silver Camps, which is another huge mineral renaissance that's happened in Tonopah in the turn of the 20th century. You've got Goldfield, which is the world's greatest gold camp, and also a huge, huge gold bonanza. So these ghost towns lived really fast and hard, you know, where they would draw populations in the thousands practically overnight. People would arrive by horse and stagecoach, and then of course after the Transcontinental was punched through and connected in 1869, then quite a few people arrived on the train, but still so many of these places are so remote that they still had to rely on arriving by horseback or stagecoach. And even though I joke about this and probably will until the freaking day I die, the history of Nevada in a nutshell is that somebody discovered silver and gold. It brought on a huge bonanza where thousands of people showed up. Eventually, mine production slowed down or the mine dried up altogether. There was a fire and everything burned down. And then it wasn't enough to convince people to stay and rebuild. So they just basically left and abandoned everything and moved on to the next mining camp. Because remember, they were all over the place. They would just drive, 50 miles in one direction and probably discover the next big place that they could start living and working. So when this happened, they would take most of their possessions with them, their most valued personal items. But another major feature that they would take with them was the timber roofs. In Nevada, you can see there's not very many trees. And so it was really difficult to build any structures out of lumber like most other places. So they would build a lot of their homes, businesses, mining, milling sites, all of that stuff out of stone, like natural native stone. And then the roof was built out of timber. So they would take those with them because, you can't exactly harvest much wood out here. And that was a lot of times the most stout piece of the building. So after they would collect up all of their personal possessions, and if they could, had the means to disassemble a roof and carry it in a wagon or, the means to take it with them, they just left everything as if they just stepped out back for a second. But really, they just abandoned it all and just would move to the next mining camp, hopefully develop their own, financial wealth and stability, rebuild, and just kind of carry on living life, hopping from one boom town to the next, at least until they could, fingers crossed, get rich. So what you've got left behind are entire towns, dozens, probably hundreds of original miner cabins, mercantiles, churches, schools, mining and milling operations, just the whole city infrastructure was left behind. And while plenty of other Western states had similar mineral bounties during the same era, Nevada's dry climate really played a role in preserving these 600 plus ghost towns in Nevada borders to this day. We're up there as one of the sunniest states with California and Florida, maybe, if I can remember correctly. We are definitely without question the driest state in America. So there's no wood rot. Most of the buildings weren't even built out of wood. So there really wasn't much to, really be destroyed. Most of the buildings were built with stone. So the Nevada's dry climate really played a major role in preserving these hundreds of sites across Nevada. So out here in Nevada, the climate absolutely played a role in preserving these hundreds of ghost town sites, but you've got a big array of preservation, right? So some are just basically a whisper of existence with maybe an old mill foundation and a cemetery that's been looted by explorers, as far back as the 1940s, and everything else that was there has been swallowed up by the desert. But you've got others around, existing as if, the original occupant just stepped out back for a second. So some of Southern Nevada's most famous ghost towns in terms of what still exists there is Nelson, and the Toyabe mine, which is near Boulder City. And it is really cool. There's thousands of photo shoots that happen there every single year, but most of it's not original to its history. It's just part of a private collector's, collection. And then there's Rhyolite Ghost Town, which is kind of down by Death Valley, and that one's also, I think, one of the most photographed ghost towns in Nevada because of its proximity to Las Vegas and all the visitors. And then Delamar is also another really famous one in southeastern Nevada. That one's really close to Caliente. And then up north, some of the more famous ghost towns are Jarbidge, which is right up where Nevada and Idaho meet. And then there's Hamilton and Treasure City, which is really close to where Ely is. and then Berlin, which there's a Nevada State Park there. Each one of them, you know, lives up to its own claim to fame, has its own personality. They're all so different in their own way and absolutely worth a visit if you have the means. But man, these ghost towns that are around Big Smoky Valley are absolutely insane. There's something about like this specific cluster that's right around here. But in this part of the state, to be able to exist, just to even get here was a complete challenge. You had to arrive by stagecoach, no trains. And then up here in these high elevation mountains, I mean, we're way up here in the mountains. The season for growing things was so limited, like you couldn't have a garden really. And then like getting other supplies in was just so inconsistent because it was so remote and also just like really inaccessible to get to most months of the year. So in other words, to come here, you know, just as much as I feel as committed about this today as a 2023 modern, you know, Nevada explorer, you had to really want it back then in the day. But if you are here, you'll see why. I mean, I've shown you a few different views. This place is absolutely gorgeous. Big Smoky Valley is like this magic place for us. And you really can't find any other places like this in Nevada's hundreds of mountain encircled basins. So the Western Shoshone were the first people to live in this valley thousands and thousands of years ago. And a lot of evidence of their life can be found in Big Smoky Valley at sacred sites like Hikison petroglyphs, which is Highway 50 is up that way. So it's kind of diagonal across the valley from where we are north of Highway 50. So there's all kinds of ancient rock carvings or petroglyphs there. And then there's Toyabe Cave, which is across the valley a little bit further south. And that's what the pros say are the best examples of pictographs in North America. So pictographs are different from petroglyphs because they're drawings and not carvings. So they say that they're the best example of pictographs in North America because they employ all four colors, red, white, black, and yellow, which were available, all four colors at the time. And because of the cave's orientation, I mean, they look like they were just made. They're all really vibrant and visible. So those sacred sites are pretty incredible places to see. And then you've got one of the greatest burro herds in all of Nevada that grazes in this valley called the Hikison burro herd. They're protected by the BLM. And then there's public hot springs in the valley. Spencer Hot Springs is probably the most well-known and one of the most well-traveled hot springs in all of Nevada. It's on public land, your land. So anybody can stop by there, and believe me, everybody does. And then you've got access to Kingston Canyon, which is right over that jagged formation right there is called the Wild Granites, and it's just over there. It's a little tiny town called Kingston. Maybe a couple hundred people live there. And then Kingston Canyon's right behind it, which goes up and over the Toyabe Mountains and into Reese River Valley. Also in Kingston, you've got one of the best backroads bars in Nevada, which is called the Lucky Spur Saloon, which is now under new ownership, which is very exciting. So yeah, there's a lake, a reservoir back there, Groves Lake, access to the Toyabe Crest Trail. That's where the trailhead really begins. And then, yeah, then you've got the ghost towns of Big Smoky Valley. So around Big Smoky Valley, there's a ton of ghost towns. There's still one of the biggest freaking mines in the country in this valley at Round Mountain, which is like 10 miles from here. I'll show you some video of that mine when we drive by tomorrow. That place is huge. There's like trucks that are the size of most people's houses there. So you've got that, but then you've also got Belmont, which is probably one of Nevada's most famous ghost towns because it's picture perfect. It looks like, you know, Bodie in California, movie set worthy type of place. And then high in the Toyabe Mountains, which is where we are right now, are Ophir Mill, which is sometimes called Toyabe City, and Park Canyon, which is right behind me here. So one thing that you can absolutely rely on in these Big Smoky ghost towns, like I was saying, are these just excellently, you know, stone masoned cabins and structures and mill sites and, you know, old mercantiles and stuff. And we'd been to Park Canyon before and knew what was up there. But as we were looking for a place to camp, we were really thrilled to discover this super cool old cabin. So we decided to set up our camp right next to it for the night. Now I think we're going to probably try to check out, grill up some salmon, appreciate the rest of this freaking beautiful sunset, stare at the moon. We'll be back in the morning for that cabin. Like some shreds of a roof. All four corners still intact though. That's pretty good. It's like just about enough room to have a roof over your head, make some dinner, fall asleep. What'd you find there, Martinez?
It's a key from a sardine can opener.
Oh, cool.
Super rare.
Those are rare.
Rare.
Very rare. Not, but they're very cool. That's awesome. Good find. We, of course, don't have intentions of taking this, but this is pretty cool. Look at this piece of purple glass. That's awesome. Look how pretty that is. And we also found this piece of pottery with the pattern still on it. So like I was saying last night, in this part of the state, it's all about these badass stonemason structures like this one right behind me. This was likely a miner's personal home, or maybe he shared it with another dude, and they would go to work right up the hill in Park Canyon Ghost Town. The mine is right up at the top of this hill, one of the mining entrances. And then there's some more mill processing equipment over that away. But up here, really, the main Park Canyon was really a processing site for the gold and silver that was discovered here in the Toyabe Mountains. So they would mine it, take it to Park Canyon, send it north to Austin, where then it could be carted out of here, probably to Carson City. But this whole region, Park Canyon, and I think together with Ophir Mill or Toyabe City further down, and a couple of other mines in the area, like the Buckeye Mine, this made up the North Twin River Mining District. I'm kind of thinking that there's not many better places to devote a piece of turquoise to ghost towns than Park Canyon. Look how perfect it matches the walls with the green that honors Nevada's longest mountain range, the Toyabe Mountains. Let's make a necklace. All right, guys, necklace time. We got this awesome piece of Brandon blue turquoise. This is crazy, and it absolutely reminds me of all of the colors of the stone-masoned ghost town ruins in central Nevada near Big Smoky Valley, and with these flecks of green. Man, couldn't think of a better stone to honor the absolutely stunning Toyabe mountain range all around us. So let's make a necklace with this little hunk of chunk. So right behind me right here are the Toyabe Mountains, which is the longest mountain range in all of Nevada. It's 100 miles long, and it goes from Austin all the way down to Tonopah, and it separates, or it goes into 3 separate counties, which is hard to wrap your mind around in a state with counties that are oftentimes larger than entire eastern states. There's a couple different theories about why it's called the Big Smoky Valley. Surrounded by some of the state's taller mountain ranges, there's the Toyabe Mountains on the west and the Tokeema Mountain Range on the east. And both of those mountain ranges behold some of the tallest peaks in the state. So in the Toyabe Mountain Range, you've got Bunker Hill and Arc Dome. And then in the Tokeema Range, you've got Mount Jefferson, which is Nevada's 4th tallest peak. So these are really tall, really dramatic mountain ranges that surround Big Smoky Valley. And the pros There's a lot of different theories about why it's called Big Smoky Valley, but the pros basically say that it's because all this condensation in the valley gets trapped in there and then sort of creates this hazy look. So the mountains are keeping all of the haze and condensation in the valley pretty regularly. With all this moisture in the valley, you may be asking where the heck it's coming from. Well, that's because 30 perennial creeks deposit into Big Smoky Valley year-round, which is a pretty high amount compared to most other places. All the runoff from these huge mountains. So it pours into the valley, it has no outlets, and then it basically just gets trapped in here, and then no wind blows through, and these giant mountain ranges protect the valley, and it basically creates this pretty cool haze that happens. No matter what time of year you're here, no matter what time of day, there's usually a pretty cool haze that's going on around here. So I was mentioning behind me that these mountain ranges are freaking giant. They behold, I think it's like the 7th, the 9th, and the 4th tallest peak all around this valley. But this entire Toyabe mountain chain is, which a mountain chain is like a series of mountains, is 125 miles long and is the longest mountain range in Nevada. So it not only beholds some of the top 10 tallest peaks in the state, like I was saying, Bunker Hill and Arc Dome, but it also includes 50 miles of terrain that never drops below 10,000 feet, which is pretty awesome. So we're up here. This place is tall. The first people that built the Toyabe Crest Trail, my very faves, the Civilian Conservation Corps, back in the 1930s were some of the first people that really, I mean, beyond natives, I'm sure that probably had some sort of a trail up there. They were the folks responsible for building the Toyabe Crest Trail. Up there right now, it's pretty reclaimed by the wild. So the northern half, it's about like, 70 something miles long. I think it's like 75-ish miles long. And it runs from Bunker Hill, which is in that Kingston Canyon area, all the way down to Arc Dome. And so it's basically divided into two different areas, if you can wrap your mind around it. So the northern half is basically allowed for motorized activity, so dirt bikes and stuff can ride up there. And then the southern half is in the Arc Dome Wilderness area, which is designated Nevada Wilderness area, and the Friends of Nevada Wilderness are pretty involved in that, but that is like the really rugged part. So no motorized activity or anything like that is allowed on the southern half, and it's pretty much swallowed up the trail. There's not a lot of trail maintenance that's going on down there, but there is regular water supply down there, which is kind of part of the concern on this trail in years that don't have as much precipitation as this, because there's not, typically flowing streams and water supplies that are up there. So that can sometimes be a concern if you're trying to backpack the area. So there's a group out of Reno, and somewhere in this local area, there's a lot of folks in Kingston who are helping with the initiative also, who are helping rebuild the Toyabe Crest Trail, which is amazing. So they've gotten a bunch of grants and a bunch of people rallied together, and Kingston's kind of their headquarter, and they're rebuilding it for hiking, mountain biking, kind of like a multi-use trail system, which is very cool. So, but back to Park Canyon, which is of course nestled in the eastern side of the Toyabe Mountains here. There were all different types of structures that were up there. The coolest thing that's up there still is this mill that is like 3 stories tall. It is super, super cool. If you ever get the chance and you have the rig to make it up there, it can sometimes be quite a challenge to make it all the way up there, especially when the roads are washed out like this year. If you got a side-by-side, I can imagine that would be no issue whatsoever up there. But that basically was an entire milling site for this whole mining region, the North Twin River Mining District. And you'll find a bunch of chimneys that are up there mainly, and that mill site. But then if you just start looking around, there's cabins like this all over the freaking place, which is very, very cool. Just like in the spirit of the rest of Nevada, there's stuff all around you. You just got to keep your eyes open for it and you'll find it. The other amazing part of this whole situation, of course, which is why we wanted to camp here, is these 60-mile vantage points of Big Smoky Valley all around. You can't beat it. I mean, you can see all the way up to Hickson, which we were describing yesterday, which is north of Highway 50. And last night, when it was, totally dark out here, you could see that giant ass mine down there at Round Mountain, which is one of the biggest mines in Nevada and I think like in the world. It's very cool up there, and the way that the arched windows on that mill frame up the wild granites here and the Toyabis is just like absolutely unreal. It's the same stone as this cabin behind me, and the same stone that will be in this pendant. So we can't talk about ghost towns in Nevada without talking about my absolute hero, Nell Murbarger. She was a badass. If you're unfamiliar with her, she wrote for a magazine called Desert Life magazine, which was based in Palm Springs of all places. And it was basically her job to travel around the Great Basin Desert. So primarily her work brought her to Nevada, but portions of Utah as well. And she would just travel the desert solo in her station wagon in the 1940s and 50s and meet with all these people in the Great Basin who either were part of some of these really decorated famous booms like Tonopah and Goldfield. I mean, they were alive when the booms were going on, and they just stayed there ever since. Or she would just talk to people who had some kind of insane connection to Nevada, like Josie Pearl, who lived and worked in the Black Rock Desert, for her entire life as a 90-year-old, and ended up, dying up there as a 90-year-old woman doing what she loved. So it's these really amazing stories that she was able to document right after these places were freshly abandoned, which is why they're so interesting. Her stories are so interesting, but also, she got to really record these stories from people who never left Goldfield from when it boomed in the early 1900s and were still living there by the 1940s. So a lot of her books and her work are available to purchase. Ghosts of the Glory Trail I've got right here, and we usually keep in the truck as we're driving around. And then I think my most favorite book of hers ever of all time, which was recommended to me by my friend Phil Corbett, was Sovereigns of the Sage, which, each of her books, this Ghost of the Glory Trail book is really all about ghost towns. That one's about everybody from prospectors to, desert recluse people who live on the edge of a marsh to people who've lived at the top of a peak forever. That is really devoted to people who stayed in the desert and protected their piece of Nevada because they saw something in it. This Ghost of the Glory Trail is amazing. You guys should definitely check it out if you get the chance. And it really is, I know every corner of Nevada, and it's so interesting to me because a lot of these places your typical visitor hasn't been, and you can read about it in its glory. Last night I was reading a chapter about Fort Shelbourne, which is just north of Ely, and that was a really legendary Pony Express station. And she went there in the 1940s and hung out with the caretaker of that place, and it hadn't even been 100 years abandoned by that point. And just going to stay the night in these old ranches all across the Great Basin, what a dream when they were still pretty much pristine. And she's one of the people who really popularized the hobby of ghost towning. She's the one who made this a thing, driving around in Nevada, searching for these old ruins, seeing what's there. And back then, it was like as if it had just been abandoned. The relics that she would be able to find in these places are I scramble my freaking brain, that's for sure. Imagine the state. If there's still all these broken pieces of pottery and glass and the front of the oven that we were able to find last night and all kinds of other stuff, imagine what it must have been like when she was here in the 1940s. That's just so cool. Today, there's a guy named Stan Payer who she basically passed the torch to, who really got into exploring all of Nevada's ghost towns in the 1970s in his Jeep, where he really got out and around to a lot of Nevada greats. So by I think it was the late 1960s, Nell moved back to where she was from, which I think it was Missouri, and kind of retired from ghost towning. And if this is not the most depressing story, I don't know what is. Desert Life magazine now is basically an HOA magazine for Palm Springs. Ugh! Not anything like what it used to be, but Stan was able to kind of get to know her. He purchased all of her photo archives of all of her desert adventures, and then basically started carrying the torch and has written multiple books ever since. His press, Nevada Publications, put this collection of ghost town stories together, sort of in like a ghost town anthology from all of her separate articles. He has many books about Nevada ghost towns, the godfather of ghost towns, Nevada ghost towns, if you will. So definitely check out his books. They're really helpful. They don't necessarily, organize where they are in the clearest way, but there is some information about, great ghost towns and a pretty robust index. So definitely check out his ghost town atlases. So the thing about ghost towns that's really hard to resist the urge while you're out here, and Nell and Stan have really made sure that people can understand this, is that these are really special places that have remained through, unimaginable conditions. This place behind me is one of them. Like, how did it last that long? It's insane that these places were built so stoutly and to last. And, one of the best things that you can do to make sure that you can keep them around for the next person just like you to come across and discover something like this that you would have never suspected is here, is to just leave things like you find them. It's really hard. It's like the same thing as finding an arrowhead or some other kind of cultural artifact where it's cool. You want to find it, but what's the point of keeping it inside of an attic, or, your descendants are never going to have any clue what the freak it was. So and then it just ends up going in the trash. So it's really hard to resist the urge of leaving things where you find them. But it's pretty cool because even on this cabin, the people who were here before us left some things up there. They left pieces of glass and just pieces of debris around here that they found, and we have those other pieces on our tailgate that I was showing you before. We're not taking those home. We just like to kind of collect them and see what we can find, and then we'll probably leave them right next to the door with the rest of this stuff. So it's important to our own American identity and American culture to try to preserve these sites as much as we can. Take as many pictures, of course, as you want. Hang around. Take a video of making a silver pendant in front of the cabin if you want to. But definitely try your best not to take anything with you if you can. By preserving these sites, that's also the best way to keep Nevada's personality alive, all this time after this place was built. And for me, with my hero, Nell, it's also a way of keeping her alive. The things that she must have seen and experienced, like in their purest form, is just insane. I can't even really wrap my mind around that one. So I just feel really lucky to be out here having learned from her and in this place that we love the absolute most, the Toyabe mountain range, Park Canyon ghost town, these amazing vistas and American history right behind us. So thanks for showing us the way, Nell. This one's for you.